I like Monster Hunter. The game series, not the movie. A couple months before the movie came out, I made a video about how I was concerned, about how the premise upset me, and I didn't like the way that they turned Monster Hunter into an American military isekai, which is still insane to me, even as someone who's seen the movie at this point. And given their handling of the Resident Evil movies, I didn't trust Paul Anderson and Mia Jovovich to make something faithful to the source material. But this may sound contradictory. I was never opposed to the possibility of it being a good movie. Don't get me wrong, I always knew it would be a bad Monster Hunter movie, but inaccuracies to the source material don't always make a bad movie. They can make for a bad adaptation, but not necessarily a bad movie. But in the case of the Monster Hunter movie, it's both. It's really bad in both ways. It's not a bad movie because the Nursula don't look or behave like Nursula, and it's not a bad movie because they treat Diablos like a carnivore when he's actually an herbivore. It's a bad movie because of the contrived plot, the awful dialogue, the stagnant pacing, the lack of interesting ideas, and the messy action. The inaccuracies are just the icing on the cake. So join me today as I take you through the Monster Hunter movie so you don't have to watch it. Please don't watch it.
Well, the new world is the world that exists. That's the Monster Hunter world.
Maybe you misspoke, but no, it's not. The region that exists in the game Monster Hunter world is called the New World, if that's what you mean. The regions in every other mainline game are referred to as Old World.
So with the movie, I tried to recreate the feeling I had 12 years ago when I first played the game, because I went in there as a modern man, with my microwave pizza on my computer playing the game.
What Monster Hunter game are you talking about, my guy? Monster Hunter Tri came out 12 years ago, but that was a Wii game. Frontier was the only Monster Hunter game on PC at that time, but it never released outside of Japan.
The Nursilla is the only creature that kind of hides in the darkness and can't come out into the light.
Oh, for real?
I was influenced by the first time I played the game, or anyone plays the game. You're a modern person going into this world and discovering it for the first time. And you do so with a character that you've created. You're not playing a ready-made character that already has a name, already has a backstory. You're creating your own character. So you're essentially a stranger going into this world. And I wanted to recreate the sense of wonder that I felt the first time I went into the world. So I thought you can only have that sense of wonder if you're seeing the world with fresh eyes.
This line of thinking isn't inherently terrible, but were generic American soldiers the way to go with it? I mean, there's tons of ways to illustrate the sense of wonder you get from going into the world of Monster Hunter for the first time, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through the viewpoint character. It's just called good world building, and if it's good enough, it'll give us, the audience members, that sense of wonder. That's why I get it every time I start a new Monster Hunter game. I may be already familiar with the world, but they keep building and building, and it keeps pulling me in. If you were determined to have it be through the eyes of the main character in some way, then I don't know, make them a reluctant learner who's hesitant to accept their destiny as a hunter before some big thing happens that makes them have to rise to the occasion. If you're super lazy, then make them an amnesiac who has to relearn the rules of the world. I'm just spitballing here, but my point is that if your goal was to create the feeling of a person with modern sensibilities or just a general unfamiliarity with the world of Monster Hunter, being introduced to it for the first time, you'd have to go through a lot of ideas before you get to the military one. It doesn't feel like this was actually Anderson's goal here, it just feels like he was being lazy. It feels like he's never played a Monster Hunter game before and he's doing his best to lie his way out of it.
It's kind of suggested by a crossover that Monster Hunter did with Metal Gear Solid, where you got to kind of be Snake Solid and kind of shoot these creatures with a machine gun.
This man just said Snake Solid. I'm so done, bro. I didn't even notice he said Snake Solid. Maybe his only reference point for Monster Hunter is the Metal Gear Solid crossover. This is actually the worst timeline. So the movie starts just as you'd expect a Monster Hunter movie to, with American soldiers driving their trucks through what looks to be some dry lands. Everyone who you're currently seeing on the screen will eventually die, except for Lieutenant Artemis, played by Jovovich. So everything's cool until a giant magic cloud shows up out of nowhere and starts chasing them.
Marshall, what you doing, bro?
In case I get my head blown off, they can still tell who I am.
Hardcore shit, Capital.
Why are you quipping? For all you know, he actually is going to die in this storm.
Link!
Never seen lightning like this before!
No, never. But I feel pretty secure here in this big steel box, holding my metal gun.
Well said, T.I. What a stand-up guy. So anyway, they get sucked in. This is a clip from the Monster Hunter movie, and now they're in a desert. Get used to this scenery because it's the backdrop of about 70% of this movie. Each Monster Hunter game is characterized by the different locales in which you can fight monsters. Just look at World, which was the most recent game at the time of this movie's release. In this game, you can travel to the Rotten Vale, an area with poisonous air, caves blanketed in bones waiting to be scavenged, and alien-looking vegetation that's a product of the harsh environment. Or what about the Coral Highlands, an area with plant life reminiscent of the coral reefs you'd find in the ocean, and an overall underwater aesthetic? Even World's desert map, the Wildspire Waste, had large caves, cliffs, and a swampy area off to the side where Barroth and Juratotus would hang out. Nothing in Monster Hunter is ever just a grassy map, or just a desert map, or just a snowy map. There's always some twist to make it more interesting. The most interesting thing about the desert in this movie is the large bones, which are initially used to convey to our protagonists that they aren't in Kansas anymore. This is 15 minutes into the movie, by the way. The pacing in this movie is awful. So it's at this point that a Diablos starts barreling at them and trying to kill them. There's trying to shoot at it with their mounted guns and whatever else, and I feel the need to mention that this movie acts like the weapons from our world don't work on monsters. Which to me, as someone who's played the games, is a little silly. What's the fundamental difference between a bowgun and a gun? It would be fine if they explained it, but they don't, so I'm left with nothing. The Diablos catches up to them and starts messing them up. I will say that I think Diablos looks amazing in this movie, like it is the spitting image of Diablos, but it doesn't quite act like it. Like I said before, it isn't carnivorous, and it definitely doesn't play with its food. Anyway, it chases the remaining soldiers into a cave, and Artemis says some dumb stuff.
Dash. Hey, I got 3. You? What? 3 mags left.
What does it matter? Did you see that thing?
It matters because we're soldiers, and this is what we do. We fight. Am I right?
Rangers lead the way.
You with me?
Always, boss.
You're all crazy.
You know, I don't care.
These are supposed to be Nursula, but they just aren't? Like, they don't have the same color palette or the same body type. The only thing linking them is the fact that they're both spider-like. I was really taken aback when I saw this for the first time, considering how good Diablos looked. So a bunch of them pull up, and the soldiers have no choice but to leave Artemis behind. And I'm sorry to say that all these characters that we cared so much about, they're goners, man. Then they show us Artemis waking up inside of a Nursula cocoon, and it's actually kinda gross. There's a lot of weirdly gross and even gory things in this movie. I'll point them out when they happen, but just a heads up. After getting out, she realizes that she's in some kind of giant Nursula web. And just to be clear, I don't hate any of this, I just think that none of it feels like Monster Hunter. I really wish this was a different movie. Like, look at this. This isn't a bad shot at all. But where are the monsters? We're 27 minutes in and we've only seen Diablos and Nursula. So Artemis finds T.I. and they try to make a run for it. Another gross thing happens.
Oh my god!
Godly! No!
You gotta go!
I can't believe that this is the Monster Hunter movie. So Artemis manages to escape, and now we're back in the desert. Yay. After wandering for a while, she finds a ship, and it's here where she has her first encounter with Tony Jaa. You'd think that they'd take advantage of what Jaa is capable of and make a more competently choreographed fight scene. So Jaa apprehends Artemis and takes her back to his home. They fight again.
Kill you!
This is probably the best fight scene in the movie, and it sucks, and there are also no monsters in it. But then Artemis feeds him chocolate, and they become friends.
It's good, right? Oh, wow. Slow down. Okay, it's good.
There's no way that isn't some nasty chocolate. That's some dragged through a lightning cloud, sand-covered, cocoon water-soaked chocolate. So they begin strategizing as best they can about how they're going to take Diablos down and get Artemis back home. At this point, I'd also like to add that we're halfway through the movie and we've still only seen Diablos and Nursula. They had this many monsters to choose from. So we get to see a montage of them setting things up. We see them kill a Nursula and use its materials. Another weirdly gross thing happens, and I feel like now is a good time to mention this movie's soundtrack. Monster Hunter is known for orchestral tracks and the booming trumpets and faster songs that characterize the feel of combat. This movie's OST is comprised entirely of generic rock and techno music. Not even proof of a hero, the main theme of the series, is in this movie. The music would have been one of the easiest ways to give this movie some of that Monster Hunter identity. You know, Monster Hunter has a sound, and that sound is not synth. Tony Jaa teaches Artemis how to use dual blades, and now they're ready to set their plans in motion. So they run up on the Diablos. Another gross thing happens. You know, I'm just gonna let this bit play out. They killed the Diablos! Yay! Now we can go on to other monsters, hopefully. So because Tony Jaa was knocked out in the fight with Diablos, Artemis tries to take him towards safety instead of trying to get back to her home. Hey look! They finally got out of the desert, and they even found some Apsaros. That's pretty cool. I mean, they're small, non-hostile monsters, but they're other monsters nonetheless. And it only took an hour and 6 minutes. It is nice to see something that isn't a desert though, and I'm being genuine when I say that. And the spinning meat is a very nice touch. After camping out, our two main characters awake in the middle of the night to a Rathalos flying around, which is seen as some sort of big event.
What's going on? Rathalos. You said that before. What the hell's a Rathalos?
For the uninitiated, Rathalos is the poster boy of the series. He's not the strongest monster, he's not the weakest monster. He is in every way Monster Hunter's Pikachu. So here comes Ron Perlman and his flaming switch axe to save our main characters from the stampede caused by Rathalos. This girl helps out who's wearing the exact same outfit as the handler from Monster Hunter World. So they go back to the base and...
What is that? Particle.
You know, it took almost an hour and a half, but we finally found something in this movie that I have no problems with. Ron Perlman explains that he can speak English because Artemis wasn't the first person to go to the Monster Hunter world from ours.
What happened to me? How did I get here?
I believe that the answers we both seek lie here. At the peak of that mountain lies the Sky Tower.
Basically, he explains that the Sky Tower is the only way to get her back home.
The ancients would guard their technology with the most fearsome of creatures, a Rathalos. Almost impossible to kill. Their only weakness is just before they breathe fire.
Oh, for real? This is incredibly stupid and none of it is true, at least in the context of the games, but keep it in the back of your mind. The next day, they get the whole team to pull up on the Sky Tower, and here they fight against Rathalos.
Hey, ugly!
Why are they all using fire weapons against Rathalos? I mean, even as a non-Monster Hunter player, you have to realize the issue with using fire weapons against a monster who breathes and lives in fire. So Artemis gets sent through a portal back to her world while in combat with the Rathalos. It looks really bad. She's rescued by some soldiers and she thinks everything is fine, but we, as the audience, know that something absolutely ridiculous is about to go down. Yeah, I can't believe that this is a real movie either. Rathalos in this scene is used the same way as any generic kaiju or giant monster is in Hollywood, so take that for what you will.
Come on!
Okay, now hold up. It was one thing when you told me his weak spot was right before he breathes fire, but you mean to tell me that the way to take advantage of that weakness was by shooting fire directly into his mouth? That place that's extremely used to being exposed to fire? How does it make any sense? So, Tony Jaa shows up out of the portal and shoots an explosive arrow at Rathalos, which kills it for good. Then Ron Perlman shows up and spouts some sequel bait. And then Gore Magala shows up for 2 seconds? We don't even get to see them fighting it? They used one of the coolest monsters in the series as sequel bait. That's some incredibly low stuff right there. That's super low. And then the movie just kinda ends. So that was Monster Hunter, everyone. Yay! Realistically, this isn't my least favorite movie, and it's not the worst movie I've ever seen either. I just fail to see why it even exists. Every creative decision feels specifically made with the intention of annoying or pissing off Monster Hunter fans, and if you're someone who just likes large monster movies, there's far better ones out there. This one doesn't do anything unique. And with the actual Monster Hunter movie releasing in a couple days at the time of me recording this video, I figured there was no better time to talk about this movie, because no matter how mediocre or even bad Legends of the Guild ends up being, it can't be worse than the Paul Anderson movie, because it's an actual Monster Hunter movie. This is the first time I've actually talked about a movie, so if you liked it, please let me know, and I'll find worse movies to talk about. And like that, we're gone.